I was handed a glass of champagne, and instead of the usual "for your victories," the waiter whispered, "This is from the auditors," and placed in my palm an envelope with a seal, which tore my evening apart right in the middle of the toast, under the cameras, under the orchestral glissando, under the smiles of those who expected another confident gesture of the winner from me. And when I read the first lines of the summons with the words about fraud, falsification, and collusion with a close person, I felt not so much a blow to the name as the charring of my skin from shame, which neither Brioni suits, nor watches, nor respectful handshakes could remove, because at that moment every gaze in the hall saw me not as the host of the evening, but as an exhibit that had suddenly become sticky, unwanted, marked with yellow ribbons. I lowered the summons into the glass, and the paper slowly soaked, like a ship sinking without music, although the violins continued to smear tar on the notes, and I smiled just enough so that the cameras wouldn't capture the panic in close-up, but inside I could already hear something old and heavy breaking in the spine of my self-confidence, because under the seal was a familiar name, my brother, the same one I had bailed out of debt, the one I had posed next to in the photo, the one who had once sworn that our blood was our charter and our secret. I went to the window, where the reflection of the city in the evening rain blurred the facades like spoiled memories, and opened the envelope completely, finding copies of internal letters, signatures, protocols that had apparently gone to the side, and there, among the dry formulations, my last name lay like a target around which the first bullets in the newsfeeds were already flying. "This is a mistake," I said through gritted teeth, keeping my voice even. "We will respond in due course." "Sir," the security chief leaned over and showed me his phone, "there are already 2 million views on the live broadcast. They call it a banquet on the edge of the abyss. Ask for a car." I pressed my fingers on my eyelids as if they were emergency memory shutdown buttons, "and find me Sergey." "Sergey can't get in touch with you," he replied quietly, and it seems he was the one who handed over the documents to the investigators. It was as if a key had been turned in my stomach and a room had been opened that had smelled of an empty table after a late-night argument since childhood, and I realized that my wealth, which had often seemed to me like armor, had turned out to be transparent glass into which everyone was now throwing their stones, and the question was no longer how much I would have left, but whether I would be able to pronounce my name at all without the taste of metal on my tongue. "Okay," I said to myself, putting on my raincoat and looking out the wet window, where my face trembled like someone else's answer to a question I hadn't asked. "If they want my truth, I'll dig it up from the deepest hole, but first I have to figure out when exactly my brother learned to lie in my voice, and why I didn't hear it." And as the elevator doors closed, for the first time in years, I felt fear, not the market, not the headline, not the deal-breaker, real human fear, clicking its teeth at my throat, and I let it click again, to remember that sound forever. That evening I sat in my own office, which now seemed to me like a cell. Every object here had a story: a table made of Venezuelan walnut, a lamp given to me by the King of Jordan, and even a painting on the wall signed by an artist who died without receiving even a third of the amount I had paid for his pain. But all of that was nothing now. The main question was one: how far could my brother go to destroy me with his own hands? I leafed through the documents scattered on the floor, realizing that someone had been preparing this for months. Everything was too systematic: reports, signatures, invoices. It wasn't just a leak, it was a verdict. The news was already saying that Ilya Gordienko is a symbol of a new era of corruption. Yesterday I was the face of success, today I was a caricature of myself. When the phone rang again, I thought it was a lawyer, but the voice was different, cold, calm, familiar. "Don't call me again," he said. "Sergey, do you really think they'll protect you?" A pause. A breath in the receiver. Then quietly, without emotion: "It's not about them, Ilya. It's about the fact that I couldn't stand to watch you destroy everyone around me anymore. Even myself." His words cut deeper than the subpoena. "You don't understand," I whispered. "You didn't see what I was building. It's not just money, it's a system." "Exactly," he replied. "A system. I just pulled you out of it." He hung up, and I was left alone in the silence that sounded like the echoes of empty bank vaults. My lawyers, partners, even assistants, they all disappeared one by one, like lights going out in a hallway. It wasn't the court that was destroying me. It was the isolation that was destroying me. A few days later they came to search me. The cameras were already waiting at the entrance, the journalists were shouting my name. I stood in my dressing gown, and I felt the lenses tearing me apart. They didn't see the person. They saw the fall. Everything that I had once controlled now controlled me. I signed documents without reading. I sat in interrogations where young prosecutors took pleasure in breaking down my sentences. And only at night, when prison was still a future, did I sit in the car near my brother's house. His light was on in the window. He drank tea, watched TV, my TV. I watched him live peacefully, and for the first time I wanted not revenge, but an explanation. Why him? I asked myself. Why did the one I had kept afloat choose me as his first target? The answer did not come immediately. The next morning in the office, the lawyer placed a letter in front of me. The investigation has been expanded. New documents have appeared in the case files, signatures you never signed. But they're yours. I looked up. Are you saying this is a forgery? No, he said slowly. I mean that someone knew how you sign, how you think, how you hide. And that someone had access to everything. Then I realized this was no longer a betrayal. This was a plan that hadn't begun yesterday. And maybe my brother hadn't written it. I felt a silence, thicker than fear, rise inside me. It smelled of gasoline and cold steel, the smell of a war I hadn't started yet, but was already losing. Okay, I said. If they took my name away, I'll find the truth, even if it bury me forever. The silence answered me in kind. For the third week, I lived in the basement of an old building that once housed one of my funds. Outside was silence, inside was dust and servers that hadn't yet been turned off. I turned off the security myself, leaving only the power supply, and sat at night among the cold glow of monitors, as if before icons. Attempts to save myself through lawyers were over. I realized that the system I had once created no longer served me. It had taken on a life of its own, and now it had decided to eat its creator. I looked through thousands of files, trying to find at least something that would explain where the betrayal had begun. And one evening, when my fingers were already aching from typing, I came across correspondence hidden under a different name, Vera K. My heart sank. It was the secretary I had fired a year ago. At that time, she had seemed insignificant, like a shadow in the hallway. But now I could see her digital footprint in the most secret sections of the company. I called her, not expecting her to answer. But she picked up the phone the first time. You called, she said evenly. I was waiting. Did you know? I saw. And I was silent until I realized what they were up to. Your brother was just an executor. He was used, Ilya. You were both pawns. I froze. Who is they? The ones who financed your company from the beginning. The ones you sold your stake to without even reading the agreement. They created a throne for you and took it away when you started seeing too much. Her words sank into me slowly, like shards of ice in hot water. Why are you telling me this? Because you once saved me when everyone wanted to throw me out. And I couldn't watch you drown in the shadows. I was silent for a few seconds, then said. If I want to prove the truth, I need evidence. I have it, she replied. But don't call here again. I'll meet you tomorrow at 3 a.m, on the bridge over the harbor. If I see even one car, you'll no longer exist. The phone clicked, and silence filled the room again. But for the first time in long days, I felt not fear, but direction. Someone, somewhere, still knows the truth. The next night I drove through the city, which was sleeping like a dead body after a holiday. The rain lashed the roof, and in every puddle my past was reflected, the glitter, the false smiles, the arrangements for cognac. I stopped the car near the harbor, got out, and the wind immediately hit my face, cold and real, like a new life. Vera stood on the edge of the bridge, her hood up. She had a small briefcase in her hands. Here's everything you need, she said, not looking at me. They didn't just destroy you. They're destroying the country you became a symbol of. You were just a cover. I picked up the case, and for the first time in a long time, not pride, not revenge, but faith flared up in me. The same faith I'd lost when I learned to count people as a percentage of profit. Why are you helping me? She finally looked me in the eye. Because even the worst deserve a chance to understand who they've become. I watched her silhouette dissolve in the darkness, clutching the case that smelled of metal and the powder of truth. Somewhere deep inside me, something stirred, like a conscience. And I realized that there was no turning back. Ahead was only a battle. Not for money. For my own name. I returned home for the first time in a month. The mansion stood silent, like a tombstone to itself. There were no more guards at the gate, only cameras that now must have been broadcasting my return live to those who had once called themselves partners. The living room smelled of dust and old cigars. I raised a glass of whiskey, but I didn't drink it, I just watched the ice melt like time that would never come back. The case was lying on the table. Inside were a flash drive, documents, statements from offshore companies, copies of letters where those I had once considered allies had signed off on the conspiracy. There were signatures of ministers, advisors, even one MP I had once brought into politics. And among them was the seal of the company I had created with my own hands. My seal. I sat for a long time, almost until dawn. And then it seemed to me that there were two options: run away or strike. The first would mean peace, but oblivion. The second would mean death, but with the truth in his hands. I chose the second. The next morning I called the journalist, the one who had first crucified me in the media. He came, not expecting me to still be here. "Do you want a statement again?" His voice trembled with cynicism. "No. I want to show you how real fear is born." I threw him the flash drive. "The answers are there. But if you press publish, your name will be next to mine forever. Ready?" He looked at me for a long time, then took the flash drive. "If even half of this is true, it will change everything." "Then let it change," I replied. "Let it burn." 3 hours later, the networks had already exploded. Documents were spreading like poison, names were falling like dominoes. People who had cursed me yesterday were now starting to ask questions. But I knew the system would not collapse quietly. That evening, as I left the city, the phone rang. "You shouldn't have done this," said a cold voice. "You signed your own sentence." "I've already lived with him," I answered calmly. "At least now I know why." A few minutes later, I noticed a black car without license plates in my mirror. It kept its distance, but I felt that it wasn't journalists. I stepped on the gas. The road led to the old industrial zone where I had once started my first business. Ironically, starting and ending in the same place. They caught up with me near the warehouses. 3 men in black got out of the car, without words, without gestures. I went out to meet them. Only a lighter in my hand. "Do you think you can scare me?" I asked. I lived among monsters until I realized that the scariest of them was myself. One took a step forward. "You could live peacefully, Ilya." "Peacefully?" I smiled. "In a lie? Faceless?" "No. It's better to die with the truth than to live like a shadow of your own money." I threw the lighter. The fire instantly licked the ground, the fuel I had spilled in advance. The cars exploded, the flames rose to the sky, and I felt the heat burn my face. Somewhere people were screaming, somewhere sirens were ringing, but inside me, absolute silence. I took a few steps back, watching the fire destroy everything I once considered my life. This was not the end. This was a confession. "If the world wants the truth," I whispered, "let it bear its weight itself." The flames were reflected in my eyes, as in a mirror. I no longer saw myself as a businessman. Only as a person who had finally stopped running away from himself. When it was all over, I woke up in a hospital room with the smell of antiseptic mixing with the smell of smoke that still lived on my skin. My hands were burned, my face was bandaged. I couldn't see my own reflection, only the silhouettes of doctors and the sound of the news on TV. They were talking about the sensational exposure of a corruption network, the heroic leak of the truth, and the mysterious informant who survived the explosion. My name was no longer heard, only the code name, Source X. And, perhaps, it was for the best. A few days later, an investigator came to see me. Young, nervous, but with eyes that still held the notion of justice. "We know that these were your documents," he said. "And we know that you could have avoided all this. Why did you do it?" I was silent for a long time, searching for words that didn't exist. "Because I'm tired of buying the truth," he finally answered. "I wanted to give it back at least once without a discount." He didn't say anything. He just nodded quietly and left. He stopped at the door. "Your brother," he left. "We're looking for him." I closed my eyes. Sergey. In all this game, I forgot that there was once something real between us. Blood, childhood, dreams of our own business, which we built from the garage. Maybe it was there, in that dust, that we lost ourselves, when profit became the measure of a person's value. When I was discharged, I didn't return to the office or home. I went to the seaside. A small hotel, the smell of salt, cold coffee on the terrace. The wind scattered the ashes of my past, and for the first time I didn't feel like collecting them. I opened my laptop and saw the news, dozens of arrests, resignations, investigations. The system crashed. But no one mentioned my name. And I smiled, for the first time, not out of sarcasm, but out of calm. In the evening, a letter arrived. No address, no signature. Just one line. "You did what I couldn't dare to do. I'm sorry. S." I stared at these words for a long time while the waves crashed against the shore. And I realized, there is no final victory, just like there is no final defeat. There is only a moment when you stop lying to yourself. And then it becomes easier to breathe, even if everything is lost. I got up, threw the letter into the sea and said aloud, not knowing to whom, "Wealth is not money. It is the ability to sleep peacefully when you have nothing left." The wave took the paper, and it melted away like a lie that had finally stopped repeating. The sky in the west was the color of copper, and I stood listening to the sea whisper something like forgiveness. And then I realized, the truth does not set you free. It simply leaves you alone with yourself. And if you can endure this silence, you are alive.